My name is Karen Parker. I'm project coordinator for community engagement of the Research Centers and Minority Institutions program, or RCMI, at Howard University College of Medicine. I'm joined by my colleagues this evening, Miranda Robinson Perez and Dr. Carla Williams. They will be co-hosting with me along with our featured guest, Dr. Roger Mitchell. And now we'll hear from Miranda.
Thank you, Karen, and good evening to everyone who is joining us tonight. My name is Miranda Robinson Perez, and I'm the project manager for the Community Engagement Core at Howard University RCMI. The Howard University RCMI program focuses on enhancing and developing necessary research infrastructure that ensures Howard University's ability to contribute to the resolution of diseases that disproportionately affect disadvantaged and minority populations. The Community Engagement Core's overarching goal is to ensure that RCMI-supported research addresses the needs and interests of the local community. To achieve this goal, the CEC partners with local community organizations to address health-related concerns, promotes community participation in research and partnership with researchers in study design and execution, and ensures research findings are shared with the relevant communities. This core is led by Dr. Carla Williams, who has joined us tonight as well.
Tonight, we're having straight talk conversation about the disparities in COVID mortality between the Black and Brown community and other communities. Our presenter this evening, Dr. Mitchell, is going to walk us through this information and what it means to us specifically. We'll also talk about the steps to getting involved in a bit of the research that we do here at Howard. Dr. Roger Mitchell is a professor and chair of pathology in the College of Medicine. He's formerly the chief medical examiner for the District of Columbia. And he's also a returning Bison, having gotten his undergraduate degree here. As chair, he oversees our administrative, research, educational, and clinical aspects of the pathology department. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Roger Mitchell.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here with you and with the centers from research centers for here at Howard University. It's my pleasure to be with community, and really that's where I feel the most at home. So it's good to be here today. In the short amount of time that we have, we're going to be talking a little bit about the disparity in COVID mortality. And the title that we've given this section is "When They Get a Cold, We Get Pneumonia." And so I want us to start off with understanding, well, first, I like to brag a bit before I even start anything. You know, we're the #1 most diverse medical school in the country. And if you're looking to come to medical school, or you're looking to send your loved ones to med school, we know that we embrace our diversity and we embrace what we have to offer. But so when we say when they get a cold, we get pneumonia. Who are they? And this is extremely important, and it's central to how we understand who we are as community, but particularly who we are as Black and Brown people when we say who are they, because then we center ourselves as other. And what I want us to realize as a community, that we are empowered to engage in our own healthcare. We're empowered to solve our own problems. We're empowered to be who we've been called to be. And so even though we've entitled this, the way we entitled it, it's important to understand that when we start comparing ourselves to others in a way that places us second, so the standard becomes whiteness, and then anything that's other than whiteness is either plus or minus, then that is furthering constructs of white supremacy and race inequity. And I think that if we start off that way, we can understand that we can take back our power in engaging in activities that allow us to be more healthy as a community and answer the questions that we can answer with research in our communities as well. So what did the pandemic do? As was stated earlier, I used to be the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C. for 7 years prior to coming to Howard a year ago. And I ended my time with D.C. government as the deputy mayor of public safety and justice for the city. But as when the pandemic was in its full blown, when the Alpha variant was here and it was just starting in March of 2020, my job was to support mass fatality management. And so we built out a disaster morgue. We built out our response to families. We processed at that time we were handling over 20 decedents every day, working with those families, working with funeral homes to ensure that those loved ones got access to the type of death investigation that they required. And in this city, we saw that there was no doubt a disparity amongst those that were dying. The majority of individuals in the District of Columbia died were 50 and older and African American. And that is no different than what Statista has shown us throughout the country. You can see to your left, and you've already read it, that the disparity lies when Louisiana had 32% African American, but 70% of COVID-19 deaths were African American. Chicago, 30% are African American, 69% of those who died were African American. You can see that as of the rate is 74 per 100,000 in the US as of July 30th, 2020, a little bit of a dated statistic, but those were when the statistics of death were extremely high. And so the reality is that we were dying and still are dying at a higher rate from COVID. In Washington, D.C., our COVID test as of last month, we can see that 64,617 Washingtonians were positive for COVID, making up 48% of the positive COVID tests. And so even obviously those that die from COVID test positive from COVID. So there is a direct relationship to these positive tests and the morbidity and mortality of those that are in our community. And so briefly, what is COVID? There are many here. We've been talking about COVID for 3 years, but maybe you were on your last webinar, or this is your first webinar and you don't even know what the COVID virus is. Well, this is a cartoon image of the COVID virus, the SARS-CoV-2. You can see that there's membrane proteins. There is the genomic RNA, which is the brain center of the virus. But what's probably the most important structure on this virus is the spike glycoprotein, or the S protein. And why is that important? Well, that spike protein is what adheres to receptors on our cells, and particularly those cells that have ACE receptors, which we have a predominance of our ACE receptors within lung tissue. And so you can see that in this schemata, how the ACE receptor acts as a binding location to the S protein, or the spike protein, on the SARS-CoV-2. And it's important to point this out because research is directed towards this relationship. Um, and, um, and it actually is a way that we can use this relationship to exploit and utilize our, our mRNA vaccines. And so, so how does SARS do what it does? Well, SARS does what it does because, again, it binds. If you look at both the youthful and the age system at the top corners of this diagram, you can see that it's going to gain entry through the respiratory tract. The alveolus are these the small sacs that exchange air across a small membrane that allows for us to exchange oxygen for carbon dioxide, right? And so you see you have this capillary membrane that allows for that to occur and allows for inflammation to get into the alveolar space. Well, when you're immune suppressed, you have the COVID virus creates a potentiated immune response. It creates immune response that is overblown, if you will. And so one of the biggest things that we see in that age system is the fact that we have an increased inflammatory capability in individuals that are aged or obese or diabetic or have a other disease process like cancer, and it leads to this cytokine storm. It leads to coagulopathy, and it is our inflammation in response to the virus that really is the disease. It is our over response to the virus that leads to poor outcomes. And so even all of the research that is being done now is trying to understand both this, but also trying to understand what happens after this, right? The so-called long COVID. And those long COVID studies, we have a study here at Howard University around long COVID, those individuals that have had COVID in the past. You can enroll in a study that helps us understand how your body is responding months and even years after being exposed to the COVID virus. And so if you want more information, we can get you more information about that clinical trial. At the end of the day, there are several organ systems that have ACE2 receptors or ACE receptors. And so your kidneys, your lungs, your adrenal glands, your vessels all have these ACE receptors. And so when we are trying to understand how COVID elicits its response, well, you're going to have lung pathology. You're going to have coagulation and thrombotic disorders, whether it's in the form of a disseminated or a diffuse coagulopathy or problem in coagulation or creating clots that can lead to end organ damage. You can have acute kidney injury, and then you can have cardiovascular disease or heart disease, and even myocarditis or inflammation of the heart muscle. So who's most affected? And we talked about this a little bit earlier, just in that last slide, that those that are older, because of the baseline increase in inflammation in our bodies as we age, we become more susceptible to an agent that's going to increase inflammation. And so that's why our older saints are more affected by the COVID virus. And that's why those individuals that have underlying disease, underlying issues are more affected. And so what does the Economic Policy Institute say? It says Black workers are greater risk of COVID-19 than their white peers. And we know this. They're more likely to have pre-existing health conditions. And this is extremely important, right? They're more likely to have pre-existing health conditions, more likely to have multi-generational households, more likely to have dense housing, more likely to be in frontline industries, without health insurance, without paid sick leave, without ability to work at home. So is this really about race? Is this really about being a Black worker? Well, the reality of it is that it's not race, it's racism, right? And it's important as a medical professional and growing up in the medical profession and being taught, we were taught that being Black was a risk factor. I'm here to tell you that being Black is not a risk factor, at least not for most of these diseases that we'll talk about today, at least not COVID. Being Black, having a small group of genes that encode for my melanin do not make me more susceptible to COVID. It is the social constructs that we've just described here, more likely to have pre-existing health conditions, more likely to have dense housing, more likely to be frontline. It is those conditions of the social construct that put me at risk for COVID, right? Puts me at risk for COVID, not the mere fact that I have melanated skin. And we know that racism in and of itself is a construct that has systemically created a second-class citizenship for Black people in this country. It has marginalized those people and brutalized the bodies of Black people and continues to see Black people as other, not just in the criminal justice system, but also in medicine, in higher education. And so Howard exists to pull down those strongholds. Howard exists as a credible messenger and a credible arbiter of real medicine, real science, and an access to freedom, right? In a way that we can all engage in a mindset of freedom outside of these parameters that are in place to keep us sick and in disease. And so Stokely Carmichael, who was a Howard graduate, understood the effects of institutional racism. He says, white terrorists bomb a Black church and kill 5 children. And that is an act of individual racism. But in the same city, Birmingham, Alabama, 500 Black babies die each year because of lack of proper food, shelter, and medical facility. And I'll jump down. That is a function of institutional racism. And that's important because he understood what social determinants are. So when we talk about research and translational research, when we talk about the importance of engagement in research, we have to talk about the social determinants of health. We have to talk about where we live, work, play, and have our being. And if we live, work, and play and have our being, and there's limits to our access, if we have food swamps where, yes, there's food present, but that food is of no nutritional value. Yes, if we have access to jobs, but those jobs are not wage paying, and those jobs can't give us the life that we need, and we have to have 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and we don't have family leave or sick leave, then those things make a determination on how well we'll be. And so research and access are extremely important in these issues. And so social determinants become an important piece. If you don't remember anything else in this brief lecture, is that you have to understand it is not the mere fact that we're melanated people that put us at risk. It is the access that we have. And so in this report out of the American Cancer Society talks about Black people having disproportionate leading death amongst Hispanic Blacks is cancer, heart disease, unintentional injuries. And right now, COVID is leading the bunch. And I put these statistics up here because we do have to understand that there's a burden of disease and injury in our community that we have to tackle. And so whether or not they're invasive cancers of the colon and rectum, all the way to stomach cancers as well. And so Blacks have 11% higher age-adjusted death rate of all cancers compared to whites, whereas Hispanics have a 31% lower rate. The divide is even more pronounced in breast cancers, where Blacks have 36 higher age-adjusted breast cancer death rate than whites, and Hispanics have a 31% lower rate. And so we need to be talking about what interventions we have of early detection and early access to care. So when we talk about how we get early access to care and all the things that are early, and I have like 1 minute left, it's not a matter of equality, it's a matter of equity. And I'll say that again, it's not a matter of equality, it's a matter of equity. I don't want one crate, if that one crate is only going to get, it's still not going to get me the apple. If the goal is to get an apple, then I need 3 crates because I'm only 5'8", right? And I can't reach the apples by myself. I'm able, I'm capable, but if we're giving out crates, give me what I need. Now, some of you might say, well, you didn't earn that 3 crates. Why are you getting 3 and someone else only gets 1? That's not equity. We don't like that. Well, let's look at this picture from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. How bad is it? Everyone gets a bike, but I can't ride the bike if I'm in a wheelchair. So if it's about equity and everybody's allowed to give me what I need. You can't have a little baby trying to ride a 10-speed. So if we're in the world of precision medicine, where we can diagnose your tumor down to the genetic variability of the exomes, then we should be in a social construct, be able to diagnose the things that are needed in community to gain better access and those resources that are necessary. And so we understand that seniors have that. This is also for vaccination. You can see in wards 7 and 8, wards 5, 7, and 8 have a lower vaccination rate than those parts of the city that are predominantly non-poor, non-African American. And so that's important to understand these barriers to access. And then lastly, you say, Dr. Mitchell, you're a forensic pathologist. I always, I'm going to give you the glum and the gloom, because that's what I see on a regular basis. But the reality of it is that if we're going to do something, then we need to generate a collective vision. If we're going to do something, then we need to invest in community health workers, and we need to invest in our engagement of our own community. That's why this program is so important. That's why the RCMI CEC is so important. That's why it's so important to have you here, and you need to spread the word anytime there's an opportunity for community engagement, because it is about us rallying around us to do the work of saving our people. No one's coming. No one's riding in on a pale white horse to save us. And so it's important for us to use our collective minds, whether we're researchers or physicians or lawyers or politicians or teachers or preachers or public health officials or business people or nonprofit or people with a whole bunch of bank in their pocket. It's us to come together and really engage in a way that we can save our community. So I want to thank you guys so much for allowing me an opportunity to engage with you today. I hope that made sense in a community forum for us to talk about COVID in the context of race. I'm here for any questions that you may have. Thank you.